Good morning, everybody. Happy Sunday to you. This video has been kind of burning a hole in part of my head for quite a while. It's something that I have to say. It is about a lot of different things, but it's especially about the government speak, the news speak, the Orwellian speak, the Nortonian news speak, it's a term in particular called BIPOC. And it's a word that I said 2 years ago, 3 years ago, when it was first coined and rolled out. I said it was an ugly word. Why did I say that BIPOC was an ugly word? One of the reasons is that it just doesn't sound very nice. It's like it doesn't ring well on the ear. BIPOC. I am a BIPOC. You are a BIPOC. It just doesn't sound very polite. It doesn't sound very smooth. It's definitely not something that a Romance language would invent or Germanic language would invent, but it is something that some girls with Bachelor of Arts degrees from the Seven Sisters universities would roll out in Rochester, Minnesota, because they've learned in their undergraduate courses on feminist intersectionality that it's super duper to identify voting blocks and interest groups and set those voting blocks and interest groups against others, particularly in this case, white people, because the term BIPOC is essentially a term that identifies and points out white people. How does it do that? Maybe you haven't heard BIPOC before. Your government has. Let me tell you what it means. It stands for black, of course, because black has to come first. It's just how the black bloc works. So black, indigenous people of color, which almost seems redundant because you're already saying, black and indigenous, and then you have to call people of color again. Well, that term people of color has been bandied around a lot, just as I don't dare say it because my video will be banned, but the NAACP stands for National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. But we can't, of course, use that term, at least some of us can't use that word, those two words, apart from NAA without National Association for the Advancement of Colored People coming in front of it. Now imagine if you had a National Association for the Advancement of WP. You couldn't, it's unthinkable. In any case, creating the term BIPOC groups everyone together who has color. Also problematic because don't white people have a color? Or is white the absence of color? Is white what you see because you don't really see this building? You see the light bouncing off the building, so what you actually see is the white light that's actually reflected in a prism. So, it's problematic. If you say people of color, you're inferring that white people don't have a color. So there's all kinds of issues with the term BIPOC. It sounds ugly. It stands for something that's ugly. And it's been deployed in a really ugly way in our government for a long while now. Maybe you're hearing the word BIPOC for the first time. But the term, it's not a word, it's an acronym. Because leftists need acronyms. They can pack lots of stuff into an acronym that you wouldn't otherwise normally think should be grouped together. For example, black, indigenous people of color. You are scooping up all of the people of the world who are non-white and running them through a lens of feminist third wave intersectionality, and you're blending them into one interest group, one voting block. I don't think the based rooftop Koreans of California were consulted. I don't think the Koreans want to be grouped in that. I don't think the Vietnamese want to be grouped in that. The Laotians, the Cambodians, the Hmong Hill tribes, the Taiwanese don't want to be grouped together with the Chinese. The Chinese don't want to be grouped together with the Japanese. Okay? The indigenous people of Australia wouldn't want to be grouped together in one big interest group, one big voting block of racial, racial unity against white people, they wouldn't go for that. They might have a problem with a few of the Australians in their place, but that's kind of a localized issue, right? Well, if you view a mountain from a distance, it looks green. As you walk closer to the mountain, you start to see the individual trees. And what the leftists have done with this term BIPOC is they've grouped all these different languages, all these different cultures, all these different races together in one ugly interest group and pitted them against and pointed out that they're different and unique from white people. So you're saying, well, why am I ranting about this in front of the government building? Because isn't that a nice way to get in trouble? Well, sure it is. But understand this. Your government makes hiring and firing decisions based on percentages of employees who are BIPOC now. So people are being hired deliberately because they're BIPOC, or they're being counseled to leave a profession in the Rochester public schools because they don't reflect the interests of the BIPOC. The documents in the county, the documents in the city, the documents in the Rochester public schools all reflect this hyper-racialization of employment and firing based on your race. BIPOC is now some kind of qualification for a job, for a contract. Is that going to lead to like the best building being built or the super safest highway or bridge being built? You're going to hire someone based on their race. Oh, that's maddening, because all of a sudden everyone's going to be looking at those folks wondering, were they a diversity hire, or did they really deserve that job based on the merits of their academic prowess, or based on the content of their character, not on the color of their skin, right? So leftists rolled out this term BIPOC. They rolled it out, and now all of a sudden, okay, they weaponized it, they deployed it as a tactic, as a strategy to silence people, and now all of a sudden, 2 years on, it didn't take long for them to discover that it's an ugly word when other people use it in their direction. All of a sudden, the government doesn't want to have it mentioned in public meetings that BIPOC, all right, okay, this person is a BIPOC, or this person standing over here was a BIPOC. Well, you've described them as such. You said it was a merit for their hiring as such. It's the reason you say we need more BIPOC on the staff. But all of a sudden it becomes a word you can't use and I can't use, of course, if you're not BIPOC. Haven't we been through a lot of words like these before? Maybe you even hear some of those words when you're driving around Rochester and you overhear some gangster rap from a car next to you. You overhear some gangster rap shouting out words that you could never possibly utter. The sirens are just part of the background noise here in Rochester on a regular basis on Sunday morning. Don't be alarmed. They're not coming for me yet. Ha ha ha. So, BIPOC is something you must never say, you must never use. This might not be my last video on the terminology of BIPOC, B-I-P-O-C. Look it up because it's being deployed in the public schools. You will want to know more about this. It's going to be the reason that your son or daughter does or doesn't get a job, or does or doesn't get some credentials, or does or doesn't get a contract. So you lefties, you liberals who rolled this term out, I hope that someday your children look at you and say, you know, what did you do for me, Mom and Dad? What did you do? If we allow people to be identified by their race, and wholly by their race, and you say, okay, we're going to be hyper-focused on their race, to the disregard of all these other important characteristics that make up a human individual, we are headed for some really weird territory up here in Rochester, Minnesota. So to me, it's just fascinating that here we have yet another term, you know, that's all right for lefties to use and deploy and exploit, and then you and I are not supposed to notice it and not supposed to call it out. Please take a deep dive if you have the interwebs, if you have access to the, you know, Al Gore's internet, flip it on and start looking for BIPOC and find out how many documents you can find in the Rochester city government that mention BIPOC. How many documents in the Olmsted County government that mention BIPOC? Turns out there's a lot. There's a lot of documents you see. There's even more documents you don't see and don't have access to, because those documents are only given to people who participate in the super duper download, the down low training programs they have, and the in-service workshops they have, and the online activities they have for employees to attend via Zoom meetings, where they're berated for the color of their skin, or in-person meetings where employees are asked to go through a kind of public struggle session, Mao style, right? Mao had the public struggle sessions where people would confess their guilt. Well, these public struggle sessions take on a new meaning when you're sitting in a activity for some in-service workshop in the government, and they're telling you to explain your white privilege and how you are extra special because you're white, and all of the benefits you had because you're white. Look, human beings are individuals, and my white privilege card has never been accepted anywhere. I've never found any benefit for being white my whole life. In fact, it seems to me that there's a lot of disenfranchisement and decentering and othering of white people right now. If we have a white identity, if I developed a white identity, it's simply from having people point the finger at me for so long, saying, oh, you're a racist, you're an outsider. When what you don't know about me is I sub-caucused for the Jesse Jackson campaign when he ran for president. I was part of that Rainbow Coalition. You guys don't know. Wow, loud and cool motorcycle over there. Doesn't quite have the low decibel rumble though. It's a thing where when you analyze people, just say, oh, white. Well, okay, BIPOC. And if you throw that term back at them, back at the left-hand side, back at a government employee or an organization, say, oh yeah, BIPOC, and you start using that word, watch how soon it is before they tell you that you're wrong to use that word. You're not supposed to use that word. So anyway, this rant has certainly gone on long enough. I know there's a couple of things I forgot to mention about Third Wave Feminist Intersectionality and politics and how the term BIPOC is being deployed. I just hope you guys would start scouring the documents over here to see how often BIPOC is used. And I think you'll be shocked because, look, you retired people, you grew up in a world over here that was really kind of standardized for your well-being. And the world you're leaving behind now is really becoming something other than the one you grew up in. So don't take it for granted. Do a little research and start finding out that what I'm saying is not so radical. What I'm doing is calling out what they're saying. I'm calling out what they are doing in terms of deploying BIPOC to silence you, me, and silence a whole group of people on the basis of the color of our skin. Wow, that seems racist to me. That seems racist. I'm just saying that from a guy who used to give sets of Dr. Martin Luther King's books to libraries and schools. We have to start speaking out against all forms of racism. Thank you.